the data says, with specifically regard to burnout, that the most common form of burnout is occupational burnout. Now, I know to be true that for most people, their occupational burnout is partly stemmed from the fact that they are not in love with what they're doing. In some part of their career, they're miserable. And I know this from talking to people year over year. I got to get out of here. I got to put in my notice. Like, I've been talking to people who are saying stuff like, I'm about to file FMLA and take mental health weeks for a couple weeks, and then I'm quitting. Like, it's out of control. Occupational burnout, occupational dissatisfaction is like at an all-time high. But here's what I'll tell you about a loss of control.
Optimal health is not a privilege, it's a right. However, unfortunately, the overwhelming majority of health challenges today can be attributed to lifestyle. This includes our physical activity, the quality of our relationships, stress, purpose and fulfillment, and of course, our diet. But what if there was an alternative? What if we could prevent and combat these health challenges with lifestyle changes before pills and procedures? You are listening to the Plant Protocol podcast with yours truly, plant-based health and business coach, and now the forever voice in your head, Lisa A. Smith. It's time to come get this health.
So here's a fact. The World Health Organization has officially declared stress the number one epidemic of the 21st century. Mind-blowing. And an epidemic is simply a situation that spreads quickly or rapidly and affects a very large number of people. And so it was mind-blowing to me that it was not just classified as an epidemic, but it was classified as the epidemic of the 21st century. We're talking about stress, y'all. Now, in my short lifetime, I've had the honor over the past many years to work with thousands of people. But in the grand scheme of things, when you think about the entire population, that's really a small amount of people. However, one thing I know from reading a bunch of scientific studies and scientific journals is that you actually don't need that many people to have a proper data sample. What I mean by that is the hundreds and thousands of people that I've talked to over the years is enough to confirm that stress absolutely is an epidemic. And the work that I do in a health space as a health coach, and the work that I do in a business space, and the work that I do in a personal development space has shown me over and over and over again that stress really is an epidemic. So it wasn't earth-shattering to me when I read that the World Health Organization has declared stress as the epidemic of the 21st century. It was more sad because I kind of look at stress, y'all, like I look at obesity, or like I look at type 2 diabetes, or how I look at high blood pressure. While it's true that a small percentage of people are going to be dealing with obesity, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, because there's a genetic component or there's something that really is making it truly difficult to reverse those conditions. The truth of the matter is, for the overwhelming majority of people who are overweight, hypertensive, high cholesterol, diabetic, they actually don't have to be. All they have to do is make lifestyle changes dietarily, exercise, sleep, rest, recovery, water, sunlight, movement, social connections, purposeful living. All they have to do is make changes to their lifestyle, and they could actually get rid of those conditions. And that's how I look at stress. While stress is a part of life for a lot of us, those of us who are dealing with chronic stress, that's the stress that kills. Acute stress, we're all going to face acute stress throughout our lifetime. But those of us who are dealing with chronic stress, I kind of look at it as a lifestyle disease. Like, yes, it's unfortunate. Yes, it's going to be challenging, but did you know you don't have to live with this? Like, there's something we can do about your diabetes. There's something we can do about your high blood pressure. There's something we can do about your excess weight. And there's something we can do about your chronic stress. So if you're here today to learn what it takes to finally put chronic stress behind you, you're in a great place, because today I'm going to talk about the triggers. And I'm going to spend a lot of time on triggers because I think it's really cool data And I think I'm going to add in my perspective from what I've seen from clients and students over the years that triggers chronic stress and why. And I think you guys are going to really love that content. And then I'm also going to share a few misconceptions about stress, even one that I just recently learned when I recently revealed that I am personally dealing with working through burnout, right? And so I'm excited to tell you guys about some misconceptions around stress that I think are widely held that might help a lot of you guys today. And then I want to talk about some solutions at the end. And so this should be a really good conversation for all of us because I want to make sure that you guys feel the importance of today's topic, but then also that you understand that there's something that can be done about it. And the more we talk about this, the more you learn, hopefully the more we can develop a solution for you that will help you move the needle. So let's get into talking about this wonderful topic of something that's impacting all of us, whether it is personally, our own personal situation, or we have individuals in our lives that we love, that we care about that are dealing with chronic stress. Hopefully today's episode will help up in that for a lot of us. And so I'm excited to start off talking about triggers. Now, the reason I want to talk about triggers is because, I study stress. And one of the things I found fascinating in my studies was that although stress impacts all of us differently, and some of us can be going through the exact same circumstance, and one of us is stressed out and the other one isn't. So the stress really depends on the person, whether or not a circumstance is stressful. However, one of the things that I found super fascinating in studying stress is that there are four common things. There are four common things that typically are at the root of stress. There are four common triggers. So again, while all of us are different, we can all be in the exact same circumstance. The pandemic is a great example, right? In the pandemic, some of us thrived and had an amazing time and came out better. Others of us, it was really hard on us personally, really hard on us professionally. A lot of people perished, right? So we can all be in the exact same circumstance and have completely different outcomes. So we know that to be true. We know we are all individuals with our unique perspectives and ideologies and all of those things. However, the data has shown that there are some common triggers that we see across the board when it comes to individuals dealing with chronic stress. So I want to start off, I wanted to put a super cool spin on this today, y'all. Let's get into chronic stress. So I want to talk about triggers, then I'm going to share misconceptions, and then we're going to talk about resolutions. So there's four common triggers according to the big data. But I want to confirm this according to my little data. Okay, so that's me working with thousands of people over the last several years in the area of health, that I can confirm these four triggers that I'm about to share with you are very much can be stress triggering for people, right? Can trigger an adverse response, both physically in the body, mentally and emotionally. And so when I share them with you, I'm going to tell you the circumstances for which I've seen them in most commonly. And that'll make sense as we go along. So let's get into the four top triggers for stress for individuals in their lives. All right. The first one is uncertainty. So when individuals are faced with circumstances in which they're uncertain of the outcome, they're uncertain of what comes next, they're uncertain of what's on the other side of a decision, it can trigger a stress response in the body and the mind. Now, I'm going to tell you where I see this most, because I feel like this is super true, right? We have people, all of us have different levels of risk adversity, right? So some of us are super risk averse, like Lisa. I like predictability. I like to know what's coming. I like to know what to expect. And others of us, shout out to me, we'll take big risks without knowing what the heck is on the other side of it. Shout out to me quitting my 9-to-5 many years ago, moving to Rome, Italy, with no way of making money and just figuring it out as I go. And I've made big decisions like that several times since then. And God has been with me every time. But I'm a little less risk averse. I'm willing to risk more sometimes for a possible better outcome. Others of us, we are not so much. Some of us just prefer certainty. You're not right or wrong either way. But one of the things that the big data has shown is that uncertainty is one of those things that can trigger a stress response in a lot of people. Now, that's what the big data says. Let me tell you what my small data says. I have seen this the most in individuals who struggle with confidence and self-worth. I have seen this uncertainty thing really impact people who struggle with believing in themselves. also known as confidence, and self-worth. Okay. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. I am a business coach in addition to being a health coach. But in business coaching, when I'm helping people launch their speaking careers, launch their coaching businesses, a lot of times people who deal with confidence issues, self-worth issues, imposter syndrome, I'm not sure if I'm good enough, they struggle with the uncertainty side of starting a business. Because let's be clear, business is risky. There's no doubt about it, right? Entrepreneurship, there's a natural built-in scariness for all of us. Like, it doesn't matter whether you're prone to taking risk or you're not. Entrepreneurship, there's a ton of uncertainty. However, there's even more, in my experience, for people who deal with confidence issues, for people who deal with self-worth issues. And so if they are trying a new venture, like, you know what, I really got a story in me, or I really am passionate about a certain segment of the population, and I want to start speaking, and I want to write a book, or I want to start a business, and I want to put myself out there, but they also deal with confidence issues, I find that that triggers more stress in those individuals, and it's a little harder for them. What I normally see is they suffer from what I like to call a failure to launch, right? So they will get into ecosystems, programs, whatever, where the mission is to start the business. The mission is to write the book. The mission is to start speaking, but they'll just consume and consume and consume. They get addicted to consumption. Let me just learn one more thing. Let me just get one more credential. And they never launch. They never launch, or they never launch significantly. And they have all these reasons why, right? But at the root of everything, it is usually a belief issue. Like, I don't know if I trust myself. I don't know if I believe in myself. I don't know if this is possible for me. I watch other people be successful, so I know it's possible, but I don't know if it's possible for me. And so I have found that while the big data says that uncertainty is one of the biggest triggers of stress for people, I have found personally in my career that one of the underlying reasons for that is confidence, is self-worth, it's imposter syndrome, it's I'm not good enough, it's I don't know enough. All of the stories we tell ourselves about why we are not qualified to do the thing that we feel like God is telling us to do. And so let me tell you what I've personally done to combat uncertainty. Many of you guys have heard me talk about my concept of radical obedience. And if you don't know, I define radical obedience as doing what you're being called to do, despite the presence of fear and uncertainty. But let me tell you how being radically obedient to what you're being called to do helps with the uncertainty. I have found for me personally and a ton of my clients that one of the ways you can kind of circumvent some of the uncertainty that comes with being new at something and doing hard things is that you only do what you feel God is telling you to do in the moment. So you don't make decisions out of fear. You don't make decisions out of this false sense of safety, like, oh, I know I don't belong in this role anymore in this job, but I'm not going to leave. I'm just going to stay because it feels safe, right? So you don't make decisions out of fear. You don't make decisions out of a false sense of safety. You don't make decisions out of lack, but you make decisions based on what you truly feel like you're being called to do. And the reason this helps with uncertainty is because radical obedience grants you favor. The more obedient you are to what God is calling you to do, the more favor you receive. Like receipts upon receipts, y'all. Like I told you guys a story a couple of weeks back when I was talking about, matter of fact, that episode dropped on the podcast today, about one belief I used to have that kept me from like being free. And it was about money. And do you guys remember when I told you guys the story about, I used to believe that I had to wait until I got more money before I could start giving money. Like I used to believe that I had to wait till I got more money before I could start investing. So I used to think that things like tithing, investing, saving could only happen once I got more, not realizing that doing that first is what got me more, like giving first, tithing first, saving first, paying myself first, investing first so that I'm investing into my future. I had to unlearn that you need a certain amount of money before you could do those things. And I had to learn that you actually were securing your future and securing yourself when you did those things first, right? So I told you guys that a couple of weeks back, one of the beliefs that I had to shift about money. And so what does this have to do with stress and uncertainty? When I started tithing consistently, haven't missed a week, haven't cheated God on an amount, you know what I'm saying? I give the whole 10%, no matter how much. Sometimes it's thousands of dollars I have to give every week, right? Which is a blessing to be able to give that much. And when I tell you guys, God has not missed a beat. When he says press down, shake and runneth over, it's going to come back to you. You only giving a percentage of what you're going to get back. It has paid off every time. So my point is being radically obedient to giving, to helping others financially has paid off tenfold, 100-fold every time. So when I say that there's uncertainty in entrepreneurship, for example, one of those things for most people is like money. Am I going to earn enough to support myself if I start my own business? So one of the ways I can better ensure I don't have to worry about making enough money in business is making sure I do what God is telling me to do, which is give some of it away every week. So by being radically obedient to giving, I significantly decrease the amount of uncertainty in my business because I give, therefore I get every single time. And we have not missed a beat. We don't pay bills late. We don't pay people late. My team is paid. Like I'm safe. And so radical obedience for me has been a solution to uncertainty. So if I do what I feel like I'm really being called to do, I'm not making decisions out of fear. I'm not making decisions out of lack. I'm not making decisions off a false sense of safety, but I'm really doing what I feel like God wants me to do. I know that that's going to grant me favor. That's going to grant me unusual favor. That's going to grant me extraordinary favor. I know that things come back to me 100-fold. And not because I want to believe it and I'm affirming it. It's because I literally watch it happen every week and every month and every year. So that radical obedience is one of the ways that I have been able to combat the uncertainty that comes with some of the hard stuff we have to do in life, like putting ourselves out there for the public to judge. So that's the first one. And what I love, I'm gonna just take a pause here to just give like a huge shout out to radical obedience, because I was just thinking about this morning when I was thinking about, talking to you guys this morning. And I was thinking about like, okay, Lisa, how have you dealt with uncertainty? And when radical obedience instantly came to me, I then started thinking about all the people that we have helped move into a space of radical obedience. So I was just thinking like that just this year alone in our 30-day vegan challenge, in our 12-week plant-based coaching program, we have helped individuals take their vision off the shelf or dust it off and activate it. So for example, we helped one woman to start her mentorship program for teenage girls. Shout out to Samiko. Hey, Samiko. We helped Sharon, who's watching right now. She dusted off her podcast and finally recorded that next episode while she was in Farm to Table. Shout out to Sharon. We have helped individuals. I'm working with one of our clients right now who was in the challenge and in Farm to Table. And she is launching her speaking business with me where she's going to minister to women in leadership. She took a chance on herself and said, I'm ready. After she got healthy with us, she was like, I'm now ready to be radically obedient to my assignment. I'm helping another private client right now write her book about her childhood. Unfortunately, she experienced a lot of abuse. And she was like, I think it's finally time to put my story out there and tell my story through writing and through speaking. So she's working with me privately to launch that initiative. So I can't overstate how good it feels to live in your purpose and to finally begin to do what you feel like God is calling you to do. And I could go, like, I have numbers of stories and testimonials like that. People who have used to work with me, I've helped them launch their own initiatives and companies. Shout out to Coach Milan, who's killing it right now. Her and Coach Dana are about to do their own 30-day plant-based challenge. They are speaking and teaching. Milan is doing fitness, like all of these individuals that come from our ecosystem. So it's a big deal. Like, I need you guys to understand, if you want to reduce the amount of uncertainty that causes you stress, you definitely want to start being radically obedient to what you're feeling called to do, because obedience grants you favor. Obedience grants you favor. That's number one. That's the first trigger. Number one was uncertainty. Okay, let's get into the second thing that big data says triggers stress and that my small data confirms. So the second thing is a lack of information. So big data has shows when people don't have a lot of information, and we can really think about this in like big issues, like the political climate right now, like what was really going on and still going on in the federal government with like people's jobs and livelihoods being on the line, right? When people have a lack of information, they know only maybe bits and pieces of what's going on, but don't know all of what's going on. It can absolutely create a stress response in the body and in the mind. And I want to tell you where I've seen this happen most in my experience with individuals. I see a lack of information trigger a stress response in people who insist on sitting in the back of the room, literally and figuratively. They're hiding. So what happens is you have individuals who are smart enough to know they need to start doing something different in some area in their life. You know, for me, it's going to be health. So they're like, okay, Lisa just introduced this 30-day challenge. Let me sign up. I definitely need to move the needle with my health, right? But then they come into the community and they stay in the back of the room. So they have a question, but they don't have the courage to ask it. They're unclear about a directive that I've given, but they don't have the courage to ask for clarity. They sit in a program for weeks and weeks and never say anything. And I'm not saying everybody that doesn't talk is unclear, but a lot of times your lack of clarity and your lack of information comes from not talking, comes from not speaking up, comes from not asking for what you need. And so I have seen a lack of information cause a stress response in people who insist on sitting in the back of the room. Because let's be honest, like a lack of information shouldn't even be a thing for us in 2025, right? Like with all of the information on the internet, most of us are like information overload. Here I am on YouTube contributing to the thing, right? So the presence or the availability or the access of information is not the issue. So how is it that the data is showing that a lack of information causes a stress response for people? It's gotta be somebody's not speaking up. Somebody's not asking for things to be explained. Somebody's not asking for the help, asking for clarity, asking to be informed, right? Now, I know this is to be true, again, with my audience, right? People who come into our communities that we curate, whether it be a health community, a business coaching community, or personal development community at our company, The Plant Protocol. No matter how much I beg people to speak up and get what they need from the experience, we are all humans and we all suffer with our own things and we come out our shells in our own time. And there are still a percentage of people who stay in the back of the room and don't move up to the front row to get what they need. And so some people fight to not to be seen or heard. It's amazing to me. Fight not to be seen or heard. Maybe they're afraid or even so some people are afraid to ask a question. It's like stage fright. It's like, you know, being in front of people. It's like speaking up, that nervousness, right? Like public speaking. I get it. But then there's another percentage of people who are ashamed to ask a question. And like there is some fault with not knowing something. And so they have shame around needing help or needing clarity or needing something explained again. And so that's where the lack of information comes into play. Now the person can't finish the task or can't complete it with excellence because they don't have the information they need to do so because they didn't speak up. So this lack of information is a big deal. And so moving up to the front, literally, that means when you physically walk in a room, but also figuratively, whether it's a virtual room or whether you're in a community, make sure the coach knows your name. Make sure the coach knows what you do. Make sure the coach knows what your challenges are. Make sure they know what your gifts are. Like that's what's got me plenty of opportunities. And I'm an introvert, but I always leave an impression when I'm in rooms. Like I leave an impression, not from an egoic standpoint, but just from I'm confident in what I know. I'm confident in what I do. I don't have to talk all the time, but when I do, it's going to be meaningful and it's going to be impactful. And I'm not afraid to ask a question for clarity, right? So you got to make sure people know who you are. The lack of information, this one, in my opinion, is more self-imposed than any other triggers that I'm going to go through today. A lack of information is almost always self-imposed. Now, sometimes that's not the case when you're dealing with like big government and politics and all of that stuff. I get it, but that's also like having the ability to release what you can't control, right? But a lack of information should not be a stress response for us, guys. We have to start speaking up. So even if you're one of those people who like to say, I like to stay in the background, I don't like to talk, I just like to observe, I don't want to say anything, I don't, go ahead. And I hope you're able to have a phenomenal experience. and get the information you need through the people who are bold enough to ask questions, right? Because it's been my experience, again, that the lack of information comes from us not speaking up for ourselves. I had a friend, and so a couple of weeks ago, we were in Atlanta for a conference and a workshop. And I thought this was so cool. So you guys some of you have heard me talk about like my propensity for the front row. Like I'm a front row behavior all day long. I go into a room, if I go to a concert, if I go to a comedy show, if I go to, I don't care what it is. I want to be in the front. I want to be in the front. Like, I don't want any obstruction. When I go to Coach Kiwi's fitness classes, she will tell you. So my good friend and brand manager, Coach Kiwi, she is a Group X, group fitness exercise instructor, and she is phenomenal. She's super dope, right? And so we both used to live in Detroit. And so she would host these group fitness experiences in like a local park in the city in downtown Detroit. And all these people would turn out. She would have this big stage with the lights, a DJ. It was a dope experience. Then she would teach her signature class, Kick Abs. And she would have all these people come out. They're already big fans of hers. And so she would be on the stage doing her thing. Now, me, I only like to show up when it's time to get to work. Like, I don't want to show up and socialize a whole lot, right? So my introverted self's like, well, what time do the exercise start? Because the event would always start like 45 minutes to an hour before the actual workout began. And I don't care to get there that early. But what that means is if I'm only coming just when the exercise is about to start, that means that the front row is usually going to be filled, right? That people done claim they spot, set their water bottles down, whatever. You can ask Kiwi to this day. I don't care what time I show up. I do not care if I'm there the minute before the music starts. I am going to be in the front row. They are going to make room for, excuse me. Yeah, that spot right there. Excuse me. It's just your towel. Excuse me. Like, I don't play with the front row. I'm not about to be in the back of the room. Like, I need all the energy. I need all the experience. I don't need nobody head in my way. I don't want no beam in my way. If I go to a conference and I ask a question, I need you to look me in my eyeball so you will know who I am. Like, I need all the juice, right? So I'm front row behavior all day, right? With everything I do. And so I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, a workshop in Atlanta, and we got into this small conference room, and it was a small group of us, and with my coach, E.T., and I made my way to the front of the room. Now, the room was already pretty much filled, but I managed to find me a seat in the front row, and I ended up sitting next to my friend, RJ, right? Shout out to RJ. And I'm sitting next to RJ. And as soon as I walked up, I'm like, RJ, this seat taken? He like, nope. And y'all, he said, he was like, we was just talking about you. I was like, what you say? He said, we was just talking about the front row. And I was like, really? And he told me such a cool story. He's like, before listening to you talk about the front row and how much different experience it is to be in the front row, he's like, I used to automatically sit in the back of the room. And he was like, I almost did it today naturally, just like a, knee-jerk reaction. He said, I walked into the room today and my eyes instantly went to the back of the room to see what, seats were available. He said, but then I remember what I heard you talk about with the front row. And he said, so I turned around and I came up to the front. And I was like, what? He's like, yes, right? And so I sat next to him and we kicked it the whole class. Then this is the super dope part, though. This is the super dope part. So when E.T. was done teaching for the day, he was leaving out because he had a flight to catch, right? And the door that he was leaving out of was right by us in the front row. And so as he was leaving out, he's giving us all handshakes in the front row, right? Now, that's not even the dope part yet either. The dope part is that later in the day, RJ told me that's all I needed. He was like, sometimes I come to these events because I need to increase my proximity to another man of God. And sometimes I just need to touch him. He was like, so he shook my hand on the way out. And now I'm good for a couple months. I was like, what? He was like, yeah, that gives me the energy I need, that reinvigorates me. And now I have what I need until the next event. I said, what? He was like, that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't in the front row. I said, what? I was so excited, y'all. I don't even know if it's that exciting, but I was excited. And so I was like, wow. He's like, I'm just so grateful for this new perspective of getting up to the front of the class. And so anyway, I said all that to say, A lack of information doesn't have to be. I find that it is us not moving up to the front row, whether it's literally if we're physically in a space or if it's just if we're virtually in a space, right? Like, let people know who you are. Get close enough so you can touch somebody if you need to. Get close enough so you can hug somebody if you need to. Be bold enough to ask questions. Be bold enough to say when you don't know or that you need help, y'all. Like, you should not be stressed out from a lack of information when you have proximity to the individual distributing the information. It's crazy to be in a room with somebody that's teaching and they invite you to ask them something. They invite you to get clarity and you still don't take it. This literally happened the other day. We taught a prep class for our 30-day vegan challenge on Thursday. And I waxed deep for 90 minutes, right? And I'm like, guys, what questions do you have? Drop them in the chat, raise your hand. What's up? And ask me anything. Do you need to know something about our protocol, our dietary protocol on the challenge, movement, mindset? How can I serve you, right? And then I thought we had got through all the questions and everybody was super clear. I said, okay, y'all clear. Sure enough, sure enough, the next day I wake up to an email with somebody asking me 4 questions. And it wasn't because she wasn't in class, because her first sentence was, dope class last night, coach. I was wondering, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, now I done told y'all I'm dealing with burnout. Now I done created a space for you to ask questions. You don't take me up on it publicly, but then you want to email me privately, which causes more work for me. Guys, you guys got to be considerate too. I'm like, I just asked last night if you had any questions and you were there and you didn't ask. And I've had people do this to me multiple times. Like, man, coach, that was a dope such and such you just did. I was wondering, question. If I'm on metformin and what? Can I have this type of sweetener? What? What if I'm dealing with emotional? What? See, want people to know y'all name and y'all face? Send the question to me privately in the chat on Zoom. But please don't email me 100 times after I just held a whole 2-hour class to answer all of your questions. Move up to the front and get what you need when people offer the space. Okay, that's enough on number 2. Let me move on. Let's get into number 3. The third, according to the big data, the third trigger that causes a stress response in a lot of people is a loss of control. Now, let me tell you where I see this the most in my small data. I see a loss of control trigger a major stress response in individuals very specifically who are unhappy in their career. So a loss of control. Now, 2 of the biggest, I would say, well, 3 specific types of control that I notice with people who are unhappy in their career. Now, fun fact, last week I talked about burnout, and the data says, with specifically regard to burnout, that the most common form of burnout is occupational burnout. Now, I know to be true that for most people, their occupational burnout is partly stemmed from the fact that they are not in love with what they're doing. In some part of their career, they're miserable. And I know this from talking to people year over year. I got to get out of here. I got to put in my notice. Like, I've been talking to people who are saying stuff like, I'm about to file FMLA and take mental health weeks for a couple weeks and then I'm quitting. Like, it's out of control. Occupational burnout, occupational dissatisfaction is like at an all-time high. And a lot because a lot of us aren't surrendering to radical obedience. A lot of us aren't creating exit strategies from stress. A lot of us are playing the safe game, thinking it's safer to stay where you are versus creating a strategy to move from there to where you want to be. But we'll get to some of that later. But here's what I'll tell you about a loss of control. Now, again, a loss of control can trigger a stress response in people in a variety of situations. So it could be like a loss of control. It really also makes me think about really unhealthy relationships where people are being controlled or people are, their autonomy is being taken away. But one of the common places that I've seen a loss of control trigger a stress response just because of the work I do is people in their career. The types of control that I have noticed that people really struggle with is time, when someone else has control over their time, right? And so if you're in a job that, number 1, you hate, and number 2, you gotta be at, like, you don't get to set your own schedules. I know some of y'all get to set your own schedule, but a lot of people don't. And so it is like one of the worst feelings in the world to have to be somewhere and you feel like you don't have any say so, any control over where you are, how long you're there. Like someone else is telling you, you need to be here 7 to 3. You need to be here 9 to 5. You need to be here 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. Like that is really can be devastating for a lot of people, us not feeling like we have control over our time. So a loss of control, specifically time control, is stress triggering for a lot of people. The other one, which is pretty obvious, we know like money, right? So feeling like we don't have control over our money, like how much we can earn, like someone else sets what you're worth in that role. And I have found that to be hard for a lot of people because sometimes the cost of our dreams and the cost of our lifestyle surpasses our salary. Okay. So the loss of having financial autonomy, right? Where somebody else sets your ceiling, right? Somebody else says it doesn't matter how hard you work. It doesn't matter how good you are at your job. You're only ever going to make up to this much in this role. So I have found that to be stressful for people. But the biggest loss of control that I have seen to cause the most stress in individuals is a loss of creativity. So you would think time and money, they're important. But if somebody else is controlling your time, but you have creative freedom, it actually makes that time thing not as big of a deal. Trust me. I have found that a loss of creative freedom, a loss of creative control has also played a huge role, in the stress response. So I think one of the reasons I'm so grateful for the work that I do and so grateful for the company that we've built is because I get to express my creativity, my brand of creativity, exactly how I envision it in my mind. So I can write a talk, I can write a curriculum, I can build out a program, I can dictate how I want to deliver my gift of speaking and teaching. Like it is completely up to me. So I could have these gifts and be sitting in somebody else's company and they're not being utilized. And I have found that to be one of the most stressful things for a lot of people, right? And that was me, by the way. Like I'm not speaking from theory. Like many years ago, I was a social worker working for the state of Michigan as a foster care worker. At that time, had a gift of speaking and teaching, and I was able to use it minimally. Luckily, I was appointed as the head of a department called MYOI, and I was responsible for pouring into the teenage foster care youth. And so I was able to set our meetings and what we were going to talk about, but I was the only person in the entire county. So luckily I had a little bit of a way to utilize my gift of speaking and teaching in that 9 to 5 role, but it didn't really get good until I started my own coaching company and speaking career. And so depending on what your gifts are, depending on what your natural proclivities are, depending on what your natural talents are, for a lot of people, a lot of stress comes into play when they lose creative control. Then they lose creative. So a loss of control, and this can be in, like I said, a multitude of areas, but I have seen it the most in occupation when it comes to occupation. So for those of you who are dealing with this and not really feeling like you have that outlet or not really feeling like you're making the steps to reach that level of autonomy, that level of self-actualization, which is the highest level according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization says that our gifts and our talents are being utilized at the highest level. And for some of us, that's not the case, and it's killing us because chronic stress kills, right? And so we have something inside of us that we know we should be working on. We have something inside of us that we know we're being called to do and we're not doing it. And so that's why it makes me so proud when we work with our students to first optimize their health and then optimize their gifts, because I understand how healing purpose is. Because y'all know purpose heals, chronic stress kills, and purpose heals. So I want you to fight like heck to regain creative control if you have lost it, because that will help to diminish the stress response in the body. So that means higher levels of inflammation markers like C-reactive protein. This will revitalize your immune system. It can restore gut health. Like when you're able to pour out and you're in control of how you contribute to society, it makes a huge difference in your physical health and your mental health. And a lot of you guys know this already, but that loss of control, your health really takes a hit when that happens. Okay. So I want you to fight like heck. Don't settle. Don't settle. Don't let your good become the enemy of your great. Okay, that was a lot for one episode. This episode was so long that I decided to split it into two because the content is so rich. And most importantly, I want to make sure that you don't just listen with your ears, but you listen with your heart. If stress is something that has been taking a toll on you for some time now, I want you to really lean in to this episode and part 2 that's coming up next week, because there are common triggers for stress, but there are also things we can do to relieve the pressure. So if you enjoyed part 1 of this episode, make sure you come back next week and check out part 2. I'm going to finish off listing the triggers, talk about relief, and there's so many gems remaining. Make sure you share this episode with someone who needs to hear it because, like I said, the World Health Organization has officially classified stress as an epidemic. And I believe we can all agree that it has either impacted us or someone very close to us. So we can see how those numbers came about. However, we can also make a decision to make some different choices and do something about it from here on out. So while stress kills, purpose heals. So let's start thinking about what we're going to do to get back in the driver's seat of our life and make some significant changes so that stress is not a liability for us. See you back here next week for part 2.
You tuned in today because, like me, you refuse to let your good become the enemy of your great. You're not settling for good health when optimal is well within reach. If you're ready to go from good to great, visit lisaangelsmith.com to learn more about our plant-based health coaching program, Farm to Table, and our plant-based business accelerator and coaching certification. But before you go, if you enjoyed what you heard today, please consider rating and reviewing this podcast. Until next time, remember, radical obedience is still undefeated. Stay obedient.